Maya's fingers froze on the photograph inside the billionaire's wallet. Her mother's face, decades younger, stared back at her from an image worn thin by years of handling. The wealthy stranger who'd just tipped her $400 had been carrying her dying mother's picture like a prayer, and Maya was about to discover the secret that would destroy everything she thought she knew about her own life. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Some moments arrive quietly, slipping into your life like a whisper before they detonate like thunder. For Maya Reeves, a 26-year-old waitress, barely keeping her head above water in a city that devoured dreams for breakfast. That moment came on an ordinary Thursday evening when she picked up a forgotten wallet from table 7. She had no way of knowing that the worn leather billfold would crack open not just to reveal cash and credit cards, but a doorway into a past that had been carefully locked away. A secret that connected her dying mother to one of the most powerful men in the country, and a truth that would shatter everything she thought she knew about where she came from. The Golden Terrace restaurant perched on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower like a jewel in a crown. All floor-to-ceiling windows and ambient lighting that cost more per bulb than Maya made in a week. It was the kind of place where appetizers had French names she couldn't pronounce and entrees cost what she paid for a month of groceries. Maya didn't belong here. Not really. She belonged to the world of bus stops and instant ramen, of double shifts and medical bills that multiplied like weeds in her mailbox. But the tips here were good, and good tips meant another week of keeping her mother, Catherine, in the care facility that was slowly draining what little savings they had left. It was 7:45 when the man walked in, and the entire restaurant seemed to recalibrate around his presence. He moved with a kind of confidence that didn't need to announce itself, the ease of someone who had never questioned whether he belonged anywhere. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored so precisely it looked like it had been painted onto his frame. Silver threaded through his dark hair at the temples, and his face carried the kind of distinguished handsomeness that comes with age and power, all sharp angles and penetrating intelligence. Maya's coworker Jessica grabbed her arm as the hostess led him to table 7, a prime spot by the window overlooking the glittering cityscape. "That's Alexander Hartwell," Jessica whispered, her voice pitched with excitement. "Hartwell Industries, tech, real estate, venture capital. My boyfriend works in finance and says this guy's worth like $8 billion. $8 billion, Maya, with a B?" Maya glanced over at him as he settled into his seat with an economy of motion that spoke of absolute self-assurance. $8 billion. The number was so abstract it didn't even register as real money. It was more like a concept, a different language entirely. She picked up a menu and a water glass. Well, billionaire or not, he still needs water and probably wants the Chilean sea bass like everyone else who sits at table 7. She approached the table with her professional smile firmly in place, the one she'd perfected over 6 years of serving people who often looked through her rather than at her. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Golden Terrace. Can I start you off with something to drink this evening?" Alexander Hartwell looked up from his phone, and for a moment his gray-blue eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. It wasn't attraction exactly. It was more like recognition, as if he was cataloging every detail of her face and filing it away in some vast internal database. Then the moment passed and his expression smoothed into polite disinterest. "Scotch, neat, Macallan 25 if you have it. And I'll need a few minutes with the menu." Maya noted the order and retreated, feeling oddly unsettled. There had been something in that look, something that made her skin prickle with awareness. She pushed the feeling aside and focused on her work. The scotch was poured, the order was taken. The sea bass was delivered with its accompanying microgreens and reduction sauce that probably took a chef 3 hours to perfect. Hartwell ate alone, occasionally checking his phone but mostly staring out at the city lights with an expression that might have been contemplation or might have been profound loneliness. Maya couldn't tell which. The evening rush began to thin out around 9:30. Hartwell settled his bill with a platinum card and left a tip that made Maya's eyes widen. $400 on an $80 meal? It was absurdly generous, and for a moment she felt a stab of something like gratitude mixed with resentment. This was pocket change to him, but it meant she could pay for her mother's medications this week without having to choose between the blood pressure pills and the pain management. She cleared the table efficiently, stacking plates and gathering the crisp white napkin he'd barely. That's when she saw it. Tucked against the leather banquette, partially hidden in the shadows, was a wallet. Black leather, expensive but worn with use. The kind of thing that gets better with age. Maya picked it up, feeling the weight of it in her palm. She should take it to the manager immediately. That was protocol. But something made her hesitate. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was that strange moment when his eyes had met hers and she'd felt seen in a way she rarely did. She glanced around. The restaurant was nearly empty now. Just 2 tables of lingering diners and Jessica folding napkins at the service station. Her back turned. Maya flipped open the wallet. Inside was exactly what she'd expected. Several credit cards, all black or platinum, all bearing the name Alexander J. Hartwell. a driver's license with a flattering photo that somehow made him look both authoritative and approachable, several crisp $100 bills in the main compartment, and then, tucked into a small pocket behind the card, a photograph. Maya's hands began to tremble before her conscious mind even registered what she was seeing. The photograph was old, the color slightly faded, the edges worn soft from handling. It showed a young woman, maybe 25 or so, with dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders and eyes that crinkled at the corners with genuine joy. She was laughing at something off camera, her whole face lit up with happiness, wearing a simple sundress and standing in front of what looked like a university building. The photo had been folded and unfolded so many times that a white crease ran down the center, and the corners were rounded from years of friction against the leather pocket that held it. Maya knew that face. She had seen it in old albums, in the handful of pictures that survived the fire that had destroyed most of their belongings when she was 12. She had seen it in her own mirror every morning, in the shape of her cheekbones and the curve of her smile. The woman in the photograph was her mother, not the Catherine Reeves of today. The woman wasting away in a care facility with early onset Alzheimer's, slowly eroding her memories like waves eating away at sand, but Catherine, as she had been before Maya was born. Young, vibrant, full of a hope that Maya had only ever seen in photograph. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Maya gripped the edge of the table to steady herself, her mind racing through impossible scenarios. Why would Alexander Hartwell, a billionaire she had never met until tonight, have a photograph of her mother tucked in his wallet like a talisman? Not in some prominent place where it might be explained away as a casual acquaintance, but hidden in a pocket behind everything else. Worn from constant handling, clearly precious to him. This wasn't a photo someone carried by accident or out of polite remembrance. This was a photo someone carried because the person in it mattered deeply, intimately, in a way that transcended time and circumstance. Maya? You okay? Jessica's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Maya snapped the wallet closed, her heart hammering against her ribs. Yeah, fine. Just, customer left his wallet. I need to catch him before he gets too far. The words came out steadier than she felt. Jessica nodded and went back to her napkin folding, already losing interest. Maya grabbed her phone and the wallet and pushed through the restaurant's heavy doors into the elegant elevator lobby. Her mind was a chaos of questions. The photograph had to be at least 30 years old. Probably more. Her mother would have been in her mid-20s then, around the time she'd been finishing graduate school. Catherine had always been vague about those years, deflecting Maya's questions with gentle smiles and changes of subject. Ancient history, sweetheart. Not very interesting. But it hadn't been ancient history to Alexander Hartwell. He had carried that image with him, kept it close, protected it behind layers of expensive leather and plastic cards worth millions in credit. The elevator dinged and Maya jabbed the button for the ground floor. She had to catch him. She had to understand. The elevator descended with maddening slowness, each floor a small eternity. By the time the doors opened onto the marble-floored lobby, she was nearly running, her sensible work shoes clicking against the stone as she scanned the space. The lobby was vast, all soaring ceilings and modern art installation, with a few scattered guests moving through it like chess pieces on a board. And there, at the main entrance, she saw him. Alexander Hartwell stood with his back to her, one hand raised as the valet brought a gleaming black car around. Without thinking, Maya called out, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Emmer! Hartwell! Wait!" He turned, surprise flickering across his features. Maya slowed as she approached, suddenly aware of how she must look, breathless and flustered in her service uniform, clutching his wallet like it was evidence at a crime scene. She stopped a few feet away from him, and for a moment they simply stared at each other, the photograph burning a hole in her consciousness, invisible but omnipresent between them. "You forgot this," she said, holding out the wallet. "At your table." Relief washed over his face, followed immediately by what looked like caution. He reached for the wallet, his fingers brushing hers briefly as he took it. "Thank you. I didn't even realize. That was careless of me." He was already turning away, already dismissing her, but Maya couldn't let him go. Not now. Not without answers. "There's a photograph in there," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Of a woman, my mother." Alexander Hartwell froze, completely, utterly froze, as if someone had pressed pause on a film. The valet pulled up with his car, a sleek sedan that probably cost more than Maya would earn in 5 years, but Hartwell didn't move. Slowly, with the careful precision of someone defusing a bomb, he turned back to face her. The color had drained from his face, and in his eyes, Maya saw something that terrified her more than anger would have. She saw fear. Raw, genuine fear, and beneath it something that looked heartbreakingly like grief. "What did you say?" His voice was barely above a whisper, all the earlier authorities stripped away. "The woman in the photograph in your wallet? That's my mother, Catherine Reeves. Why do you have her picture?" The silence that followed Maya's questions stretched between them like a chasm, deep and dangerous. Alexander Hartwell stood in the grand lobby of the Meridian Tower, one of the most powerful men in the country, and for the first time in perhaps decades he looked completely unmoored. The valet had stepped out of the car and was hovering uncertainly, sensing the sudden tension but unsure whether to intervene or disappear. The few people moving through the lobby gave them a wide berth, perhaps responding to some primal instinct that recognized a private crisis unfolding in a public space. "Catherine Reeves," Hartwell repeated. the name emerging like a prayer or a curse. He opened the wallet with hands that Maya noticed were trembling slightly, extracted the photograph, and stared at it as if seeing it for the first time, though the worn edges told a different story. Dear God, you're her daughter. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact delivered with the weight of revelation. Maya felt her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Yes, I'm her daughter, and I want to know why you have that picture, why you've been carrying it around like it's something precious. Who are you to her? Hartwell looked up from the photograph and Maya saw something shift in his expression. The shock was being replaced by calculation, the businessman reasserting control over the man who had been caught off guard. This isn't the place for this conversation, he said quietly, and I'm not sure it's a conversation we should be having at all. That's not good enough. Maya surprised herself with the force in her voice. She was a waitress confronting a billionaire in the lobby of one of the most expensive buildings in the city, and she should have been intimidated. Instead, she felt a righteous anger building in her chest, fueled by years of questions her mother had deflected, by the mystery of a father she'd never known, by the injustice of watching Catherine's mind slowly disintegrate while this man, whoever he was to her, lived in a world of penthouses and platinum cards. You don't get to just walk away. That's my mother. I deserve to know. Something in her words seemed to strike him. He closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, the calculation had been replaced by something softer, sadder. How is she? He asked, and the question was so unexpected, so genuinely concerned, that Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. She's dying, Maya said bluntly, watching him flinch at the words. Early onset Alzheimer's. She's only 53, but most days she doesn't remember who I am anymore. Most days she thinks she's still in graduate school or teaching her first class or living in some past that I was never part of. The doctors say she has maybe 6 months left before she won't be able to swallow, before her body forgets how to do even the most basic thing. Hartwell's face crumbled. For just a moment, the mask of the powerful executive fell away entirely, and Maya saw naked grief in his eyes. I didn't know, he whispered. I had no idea. She's so young. You didn't know because you weren't there, Maya shot back. You weren't there when she was diagnosed 3 years ago. You weren't there when I had to sell our house to pay for her care. You weren't there for any of it, so again, who are you to her? And who are you to me? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that neither of them seemed ready to voice. Hartwell's driver had gotten back in the car, apparently deciding that discretion was the better part of valor. The valet had retreated to his station. They were effectively alone in the vast lobby, two people connected by a photograph, and a woman who was slowly forgetting she had ever existed. Get in the car, Hartwell said finally. Please. We can't talk about this here, and you deserve answers. I owe you that much, at least. The Maya knew she should refuse. Every instinct screamed at her that getting into a car with a stranger, billionaire or not, was dangerous. But those same instincts also told her that this was her only chance. If she let him drive away now, she might never see him again. He could disappear back into his world of boardrooms and private jets, and she would be left with nothing but questions and a photograph she'd seen for all of 30 seconds. Fine, she said, but I need to tell my manager I'm leaving. I'll wait. Maya ran back to the elevator, her mind spinning. Jessica was going to lose her mind when she heard about this. Or maybe Maya wouldn't tell her. Maybe she wouldn't tell anyone until she knew what this was, what it meant. She found her manager, Marcus, in his office doing paperwork. I need to leave early, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Family emergency. Marcus looked up, concern immediately creasing his features. Your mother? Something like that. I'm sorry. I know we're supposed to close, but Jessica can handle it, right? Of course. Go. Do what you need to do. Marcus waved her away, already reaching for his phone to call in additional help. Maya grabbed her jacket and purse from her locker, her hands shaking so badly she could barely work the combination lock. When she got back to the lobby, Hartwell was standing exactly where she'd left, the photograph still clutched in his hand. The car was as luxurious inside as Maya had expected, all soft leather and that new car smell that probably costs extra at this level of wealth. A privacy screen separated them from the driver, and Hartwell had already raised it before Maya even had her seatbelt fastened. The city slid by outside the tinted windows, a blur of lights and late evening traffic. For several long minutes, neither of them spoke. Maya watched Hartwell from the corner of her eye. He sat very still, the photograph now resting on his knee, his gaze fixed on something outside the window that she couldn't see. I met your mother 30 years ago, he said finally, his voice quiet but clear. I was 26, fresh out of business school, full of ambition and not much else. God, my father had just died, leaving me a company that was hemorrhaging money and a reputation I had to prove I deserved. I was working 20-hour days trying to turn things around, living on coffee and adrenaline. Catherine was a graduate student at the university where we had our corporate office. She was studying literature of all, Victorian poetry, the Romantics. Maya felt something twist in her chest. Her mother had been a professor before the Alzheimer's had forced her early retirement. She'd specialized in 19th century British literature. Maya had grown up surrounded by books, by her mother's passion for Wordsworth and Keats, by bedtime stories that were more likely to be about Heathcliff and Catherine Earnshaw than princesses and dragons. We met in a coffee shop near campus, Hartwell continued. a faint smile touching his lips at the memory. I was there because my assistant had told me about their espresso, said it was the only thing in the city strong enough to keep me upright. Catherine was there grading papers, completely absorbed in her work. I spilled my coffee all over her table. Ruined probably 20 student essays. She should have been furious, but instead she laughed. She had this laugh, this incredible, joyful laugh that just lit up the whole room. Maya knew that laugh, or she had known it before the disease had started stealing pieces of her mother away. What happened? She asked quietly. We fell in love, Hartwell said simply. Completely, stupidly, impossibly in love. I'd never felt anything like it. She was brilliant and funny and passionate about things that had nothing to do with money or power. She made me remember that there was a world beyond quarterly reports and board meetings. We were together for 2 years, the best 2 years of my life. So why did you leave? Maya demanded. If it was so perfect, why aren't you in any of her stories? Why didn't I grow up knowing you? Why wasn't there even a photograph of you in our house? Hartwell turned to look at her, and the pain in his eyes was so raw it made Maya's anger falter. I didn't leave, he said. She did, or rather she made me leave. It was complicated. My company was in trouble. There were hostile takeover attempts, boardroom battles, family drama that would make a soap opera look tame. My mother, my brother, they all wanted me to marry someone suitable, someone from our world. There was a woman, Vanessa Thornton, daughter of one of our biggest investors. The marriage would have secured the capital I needed to save the company. It was purely business, at least from my side. You chose money over her, Maya said flatly. No, Hartwell said with surprising force. No, I chose her. I told my family I wouldn't marry Vanessa. I told them Catherine was the only woman I wanted. I was ready to let the company fail if that's what it took. He paused, his jaw tightening. But Catherine wouldn't let me. She said she couldn't be the reason I lost everything my father had built. She said she loved me too much to watch me destroy my life for her. We fought about it for weeks. And then one day she was just gone. She left the city, changed her phone number. I tried to find her, but she made it clear through mutual friends that she didn't want to be found. Maya felt like the ground was shifting beneath her. When was this? When did she leave? October 1995, Hartwell said immediately, as if the date was burned into his memory. October 15th, to be exact. It was a Sunday, raining. Maya did the math in her head, her heart beginning to race. October 1995, she'd been born in June 1996, 8 months after her mother had left the city, 8 months after she'd walked away from Alexander Hartwell. Did she know? Maya heard herself ask. When she left, did she know she was pregnant? The question hung in the air between them, transforming the luxurious interior of the car into something that felt small and suffocating. Maya watched Alexander Hartwell's face carefully, cataloging every micro-expression, every flicker of emotion that crossed his features. She saw shock first, then confusion, and then a dawning realization that seemed to physically impact him. He pressed back against the leather seat as if he'd been struck. Pregnant, he repeated, the word emerging barely above a whisper. You were born in June 1996. June 23rd, Maya confirmed, her voice steadier than she felt. Elmhurst Medical Center, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. My mother raised me alone. She always told me my father was someone she'd dated briefly in graduate school, that he'd moved away before she knew she was pregnant, that she'd lost touch with him. She said she tried to find him but couldn't. I used to imagine him sometimes, wonder if he knew I existed, if he ever thought about me. Single quotes. Hartwell had gone completely pale. He was doing the same math Maya had done, counting backward from her birthday to the date he'd last seen Catherine. His hands gripped the edge of the seat, knuckles white with tension. She didn't tell me, he said, and there was something breaking in his voice. She knew. She must have known, or at least suspected. That's why she left. That's why she disappeared so completely. She didn't want me to know. Why wouldn't she want you to know? Maya demanded, though even as she asked, she thought she understood. Her mother had been proud, fiercely independent. The idea of being seen as a burden, of trapping someone with an unplanned pregnancy, would have been unbearable to her, especially if she'd already convinced herself that their worlds were too different, that their relationship was doomed. Because she thought I'd marry her out of obligation instead of love, Hartwell said, arriving at the same conclusion. Because she thought I'd resent her for it eventually, or resent you. Because she was trying to protect both of us from a life she thought would make us all miserable. He let out a bitter laugh. She was wrong. God, she was so wrong. I would have given up everything, the company, the money, all of it. I would have walked away from it all in a heartbeat if she'd just told me. Maya wanted to believe him, but there was a part of her that remained skeptical. It was easy to say what you would have done 30 years after the fact, when the choice had been made for you and you'd never had to prove it. You say that now, she said carefully, but you were 26 and trying to save your family's company. You had your mother and brother pressuring you to marry someone else. Would you really have chosen us? Or would you have convinced yourself that marrying Vanessa was the practical choice, that you could support us financially even if you couldn't be with us? The question seemed to strike him hard. He closed his eyes, and Maya saw him actually consider it, really think about who he'd been 3 decades ago instead of just offering platitudes. When he opened his eyes again, there was a terrible honesty. I don't know. he admitted. I want to say yes, absolutely, without hesitation, but you're right. I was young and ambitious and terrified of losing everything my father had built. I might have convinced myself that I was doing the right thing for her. I might have chosen duty over love and told myself it was noble. He looked at her directly. But I can tell you this, I never married Vanessa. I never married anyone. I saved the company, I built an empire, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and none of it has ever made me as happy as those 2 years with your mother. The raw vulnerability in his voice made something crack in Maya's chest. This wasn't the polished billionaire from the restaurant. This was a man who had spent 30 years carrying a photograph of the woman he'd lost, who had built everything, and still felt like he had nothing. Did you ever try to find her again? She asked. Every year, Hartwell said quietly. For the first decade, I hired investigators. They'd track her down, and I'd sit with the information, her address, her phone number, and I'd try to work up the courage to call. But she'd made her choice so clear. She'd walked away and stayed away. What right did I have to force myself back into her life? Then the report stopped mentioning any romantic relationship, and I saw she was teaching at a small college in Connecticut. She seemed stable, happy. I told myself she was better off without me. She wasn't happy, Maya said, and she didn't try to keep the accusation out of her voice. She was lonely. She dedicated her life to her work and to raising me, and she did an incredible job, but I could see it sometimes. The sadness. She'd look at couples in restaurants or parents at my school events, and there'd be this expression on her face, like she was remembering something beautiful that she'd lost. I asked her once when I was 15 if she ever regretted not finding my father, not trying harder to build a family. Do you know what she said? Hartwell shook his head mutely. She said that some loves are so profound that they can't exist in the real world. They're too big, too intense. They burn too bright to last. She said she'd had her great love, and it had been enough to sustain her for a lifetime, even if it only lasted 2 years. She said she wouldn't trade those 2 years for a lifetime of something ordinary. Maya's voice cracked. I thought she was being romantic, poetic. I didn't understand she was talking about something real, about someone specific. About me, Hartwell said wonderingly. About you, Maya confirmed. She never stopped loving you. Even when the Alzheimer's started taking everything else, your name was one of the last things she remembered. Not Maya, her own daughter, but Alex. She'd call for Alex. The nurses thought it was confusion, that she was cycling through different people from her past. I thought maybe it was a character from one of her books. I never imagined it was a real person, someone who was still alive. Someone who had been carrying her picture in his wallet all these years. The car had stopped moving at some point during their conversation. Maya looked out the window and realized they were parked in front of a sleek high-rise overlooking the river, all glass and steel reaching up into the night sky. Where are we? She asked. My home, Hartwell said. I thought we could talk more private, but if you're uncomfortable, I can take you anywhere you want to go. Back to the restaurant, your apartment, wherever you feel safe. Maya should have said no. She should have insisted he'd take her home, or at least to a neutral public location. But she was exhausted, emotionally wrung out, and the idea of going back to her tiny studio apartment with its constant reminder of medical bills and her mother's deteriorating condition was unbearable. More than that, she was curious. She wanted to see where this man lived, this father she'd never known she had. She wanted to understand what her mother had walked away from. Okay, she said, but I need to call the care facility, let them know where I am in case there's an emergency with my mother. Of course. The building's lobby was even more opulent than the Meridian Tower, all marble and modern art, and a doorman who greeted Hartwell by name with the kind of deference reserved for royalty. They took a private elevator that required a key to operate, riding up in silence that felt less hostile now and more contemplative. They were both processing, trying to adjust to a new reality that had materialized out of nowhere in the space of an hour. Hartwell's penthouse took up the entire top floor of the building. When the elevator doors opened directly into the apartment, Maya felt her breath catch. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 sides, offering a panoramic view of the city that made it look like a carpet of stars. The furnishings were modern and expensive, but somehow impersonal, as if a decorator had been hired to create a showpiece rather than a home. There were no family photos, no personal touches, no signs that anyone actually lived here. It's beautiful, Maya said, because it was, even if it was also cold. It's a museum, Hartwell said with a self-deprecating smile. I'm rarely here. I work most of the time, and when I'm not working, I'm traveling for work. I bought it because real estate advisors told me it was a good investment, not because I needed 14,000 square feet of living space. He led her to a living area with leather furniture positioned to face the windows and the view. He poured himself a scotch from a crystal decanter on a side table, then hesitated. Would you like something to drink? I have wine, or I could make coffee, or there's water, juice. Water's fine, Maya said. She needed to keep her head clear. As he went to get her water, she stood at the window looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, her mother was sleeping in a care facility that smelled of antiseptic and despair, her brilliant mind reduced to fragments and shadows. And here was the man her mother had loved enough to sacrifice everything for, living alone in a palace in the sky, surrounded by wealth but starved of connection. When Hartwell returned with her water, he seemed to have regained some of his composure. I want to help, he said without preamble. Your mother's care, whatever she needs, whatever you need. Money isn't an object. I can get her into the best facility in the country, hire the best doctors, experimental treatments if there are any. Maya wanted to refuse on principle, but she thought about her mother, About the care facility with its understaffed shifts and generic meals. About the mountain of debt that grew with each passing month. Why? She asked. Because you feel guilty? Yes, Hartwell said honestly, but also because she's Catherine, and even if she doesn't remember me, even if I never get to tell her how sorry I am, I can at least make sure her final months are comfortable. And because you're my daughter. The words hung in the air between them, stark and undeniable. You're my daughter. Maya had suspected it from the moment she'd done the math, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that hit her like a physical force. She sat down heavily on the leather sofa, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. 26 years of wondering, of creating fantasy versions of the father she'd never known, and here he was. Not a deadbeat who'd abandoned them. Not someone who'd never cared, but a man who'd never even known she existed. We should do a DNA test, Maya heard herself say, her voice sounding distant and mechanical. Just to be sure. I mean, you can't just assume based on timing alone, of course. Hartwell agreed immediately. Whatever you need to feel certain, I can have my doctor arrange it tomorrow. Results can be expedited. He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. But I don't need a test to know. I can see Catherine in every feature. Your eyes. That's her. The way you tilt your head when you're thinking, that's her. Even your voice has the same cadence, the same music to it. Maya felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes and angrily blinked them away. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of this stranger who was somehow her father. This is insane, she said, and a slightly hysterical laugh bubbled up in her throat. 6 hours ago, I was serving you sea bass and worrying about whether I could afford my mother's prescriptions this month. Now I'm sitting in a penthouse with a billionaire who's telling me he's my father. This doesn't happen in real life. No? Hartwell agreed quietly. It doesn't, but here we are. Maya took a long drink of water, trying to steady herself. Her mind was racing through the implications, the questions, the massive shift in her understanding of her own history. Why did you come to the restaurant tonight? She asked suddenly. The Golden Terrace isn't exactly your usual scene, is it? I checked the reservation list after you left. You didn't have a booking. You just walked in. Something flickered across Hartwell's face. Guilt, perhaps, or embarrassment. No, he admitted, it's not my usual scene. I was supposed to be at a dinner across town, a business thing, tedious but necessary. I left early. I couldn't stand it. All those people making small talk, pretending to care about things that don't matter. I started driving and I didn't know where I was going. I saw the restaurant and just walked in. He looked at her. I was thinking about Catherine. I've been thinking about her all day. It was the anniversary, October 5th, 10th. 30 years ago today, she left. The revelation sent a chill down Maya's spine. Of all the nights for him to wander into a restaurant, of all the coincidences in the universe, he'd chosen the anniversary of losing her mother. You still mark the date, she said softly. Every year, he confirmed. I usually spend it working, trying to distract myself, but today I couldn't. Today it felt like 30 years was too long, like I'd wasted all this time building things that don't matter instead of searching harder for the one thing that did. He met her eyes, and then you appeared, carrying my wallet, asking me about a photograph. Do you believe in fate? I don't know what I believe anymore, Maya said honestly. My whole life just got rewritten in the space of an hour. They sat in silence for a moment, both processing the magnitude of what had happened. Finally, Hartwell spoke again. Tell me about her. About Catherine. What was she like as a mother? What was your life like growing up? It was such a simple question, but it opened something in Maya. She found herself talking, the words pouring out of her. She told him about her childhood, about the small house in Connecticut filled with books, about bedtime stories that were always about brave heroines and tragic heroes. She told him about her mother's passion for teaching, how she could make Victorian poetry come alive for bored teenagers, how students would show up at their house asking for extra help because Catherine made them feel like they mattered. She told him about the fire when she was 12 that had destroyed most of their possessions, how they'd rebuilt with almost nothing. She told him about working her way through community college while helping her mother grade papers, about the day 3 years ago when Catherine had gotten lost driving home from the grocery store she'd been going to for 15 years. The diagnosis came a week later, Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. Early onset Alzheimer's, aggressive progression. The doctor said she might have 5 years if we were lucky. It's been 3 and she's already in the advanced stages. Most days she doesn't know who I am. Sometimes she thinks I'm her sister who died in childhood. Sometimes she thinks I'm one of her students. Sometimes she just stares at me like I'm a stranger who's invaded her home. So sorry, Hartwell said, and the inadequacy of the words seemed to pain him. I should have been there. I should have found you both years ago. Maybe, Maya said. Or maybe Mom was right to keep us separate. Maybe it would have been worse if you'd known. Maybe you would have resented us or tried to control everything, or maybe we would have been just another obligation you checked off your list. She looked at him directly. I don't know you. You're a stranger who happens to share my DNA. You can't just walk into my life and expect me to call you Dad and pretend we have a relationship. The words were harsh, but Hartwell didn't flinch. You're right, he said. I haven't earned that. I don't know if I ever can, but I'd like the chance to try. Not to replace anything or force a connection, but just to be part of your life in whatever capacity you're comfortable with. And to help with Catherine, please, let me do that at least. Maya wanted to refuse. Pride demanded it. But she thought about her mother wasting away in a facility that smelled like industrial cleaner and overcooked vegetable. About the nurses who were kind but overworked. About the fact that Maya could only visit once a day because she was working double shifts just to keep Catherine there. What kind of help are you talking about? She asked cautiously. There's a place, Hartwell said, leaning forward. The Evergreen Institute. It's a private care facility about an hour hour north of the city. They specialize in Alzheimer's and dementia patients. State-of-the-art medical care, but designed to feel like a home, not a hospital. Private rooms that families can decorate however they want. Gourmet meals prepared by actual chefs, not institutional food. A staff-to-patient ratio of nearly 1:1. Music therapy, art therapy, memory gardens. It's where I'd want to be if I were in Captain. It sounds expensive, Maya said, though expensive didn't begin to cover what he was describing. It sounded impossibly luxurious, the kind of place that only existed in glossy brochures designed to make wealthy families feel less guilty about warehousing their inconvenient relatives. It is, Hartwell admitted, prohibitively so for most people, but money is the one thing I have in abundance. Let me use it for something that actually matters. Let me give Catherine the best possible care for whatever time she has left. Maya felt the fight draining out of her, who was so tired. Tired of working 70-hour weeks. Tired of lying awake at night doing calculations, trying to figure out how to stretch her paycheck to cover everything. Tired of feeling helpless as she watched her mother disappear piece by piece. On one condition, she said finally, I want to see it first. I want to meet the staff, see the facilities, and if I don't think it's right for her, then we look at other options. Deal? Deal. Hartwell agreed immediately. We can go tomorrow if you'd like. I'll clear my schedule. You can do that? Just clear your whole day on a moment's notice. A wry smile touched his lips. One of the few advantages of being the boss. I answer to a board, but day to day my time is my own. Paused. There's something else we need to discuss. Your work situation. Maya bristled immediately. I'm not quitting my job. I don't care how much money you have. I'm not going to become some kind of dependent. I'm not asking you to quit, Hartwell said, holding up his hand. You're working yourself into the ground. Double shifts, 6 days a week. When do you sleep? When do you have time for yourself? If you're going to be visiting Catherine more often, especially if she moves to Evergreen, you'll need more flexibility. What are you suggesting? Let me cover your expenses, he said. Rent, bills, whatever you need. Work if you want to, but work because you want to, not because you'll starve if you don't. Take time to be with your mother. Take time to figure out what you actually want to do with your life, not just what you have to do to survive. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. Maya thought about sleeping past dawn, about not having to count every dollar, about being able to visit her mother in the middle of the day instead of rushing over after work when she was too exhausted to do more than sit and hold Catherine's hand. But it also felt like a trap, like accepting would mean giving up something essential about herself. Her independence, her ability to claim she'd made it on her own terms. I need time to think about it, she said finally. This is all happening too fast. 12 hours ago I didn't know you existed. Now you're offering to take care of everything, and I don't know if that's generosity or guilt or some kind of control thing. It's all three, Hartwell said with surprising honesty. I am generous with my money because I have more than I need. I do feel guilty about missing 26 years of your life. And yes, I'm used to solving problems by throwing resources at them, which probably is a control thing. He met her eyes. But mostly, Maya, I'm a man who just found out he has a daughter and I want to do right by her, even if I'm doing it clumsily. Maya didn't sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed in her studio apartment, staring at the ceiling and watching the headlights from passing cars paint moving shadows across the water-stained plaster. Her mind kept cycling through the same impossible fact. Alexander Hartwell was her father. Her mother had walked away from billions of dollars to protect a man who'd never stopped loving her. Everything Maya had believed about her origins, about why she and her mother had struggled, about the choices Catherine had made, all of it had been rewritten in a single evening. At 6 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and made coffee with hands that were still trembling slightly. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It's Alexander. I hope it's not too early. The visit to Evergreen is scheduled for 10 a.m. if that works for you. I can pick you up or send a car, whatever you're comfortable with. Maya stared at the message. Alexander. Not Mr. Hartwell, not Sir. Just Alexander. It felt strange to think of him that way. Intimate in a way that made her uncomfortable. She typed back, I'll meet you there. Send me the address. The response came immediately. I'd prefer to drive you. We should arrive together. It will make things smoother with the staff. Maya wanted to argue, to maintain her independence, but she was too exhausted to fight. Fine, pick me up at 9:30. She sent her address and immediately regretted it. Her apartment building was in a part of town that real estate agents politely called transitional, which meant the lobby smelled like old cooking and the elevator only worked half the time. It was worlds away from Hartwell's glass tower, and she felt a preemptive embarrassment at the contrast. She showered and dressed carefully, choosing the one nice outfit she owned that wasn't her work uniform, a simple black dress she'd bought for her mother's last faculty dinner before the diagnosis. It was a little worn at the seams now, but it was clean and professional. She spent more time than usual on her makeup, trying to hide the circles under her eyes, and then felt angry at herself for caring what she looked like. This wasn't a social call. This was about her mother. At 9:25, her phone buzzed again. I'm downstairs. Maya grabbed her jacket and purse and took the stairs because the elevator was, predictably, not working. When she emerged from the building, she found Hartwell leaning against the same black sedan from the night before. He dressed down slightly, trading the formal suit for dark trousers and a cashmere sweater under a wool coat. He still looked expensive, but less intimidating. When he saw her, his face face brightened with something that might have been hope. "Good morning," he said as she approached. "How did you sleep?" "I didn't," Maya said honestly. "Too much to process, I know the feeling." He opened the passenger door for her and Maya slid in, noticing that he'd dismissed his driver. He was driving himself today. The gesture felt significant, like he was trying to make this less formal, more personal. As they pulled into traffic, Hartwell cleared his throat. "I took the liberty of calling the director of Evergreen last night. I told her the situation, that we were bringing your mother for a consultation. I didn't mention our relationship. I thought that should be your decision, how much you want to share." "Thank you," Maya said, surprised and touched by his discretion. "What did you tell her?" "That Catherine Reeves is a dear friend who's been struggling with early onset Alzheimer's, and that I want to ensure she receives the best possible care." "Which is the truth, if not the complete truth." He glanced at her. "How long has it been since you've seen her?" "Your mother?" 3 days. Maya admitted. "I usually go every day, but I've been pulling doubles at the restaurant. By the time I get off work, visiting hours are over. I call the nurse's station to check on her, but it's not the same. After today, that changes," Hartwell said firmly. "Whatever else you decide about my offer, you're not going to miss time with Catherine because of work. I'll talk to your manager, arrange for someone to cover your shifts." "I can arrange my own schedule," Maya said defensively. "I'm sure you can," Hartwell said mildly, "but you shouldn't have to choose between paying rent and seeing your mother. No one should have to make that choice." Maya wanted to argue, but she couldn't. He was right. She hated that he was right, hated that it had taken a stranger swooping in with his billions to point out how unjust her situation was. "Tell me about Evergreen," she said instead, changing the subject. "How do you know about it?" "A business associate had his mother there for the last 2 years of her life," Hartwell said. "He spoke very highly of the care she received. I went to visit him there once and was impressed by what I saw. The staff seemed genuinely compassionate, not just going through the motions. The residents looked cared for, not warehoused. It stayed with me. They drove north out of the city, the urban landscape gradually giving way to suburbs and then to rolling countryside. Trees lined the road, their leaves brilliant with autumn color. It was a beautiful day, crisp and clear, the kind of day that made everything feel possible." Maya watched the scenery pass and tried to imagine her mother here, away from the concrete and noise of the city. Catherine had grown up in rural Vermont. She'd always loved nature, used to take Maya on long walks through parks, pointing out birds and trees, reciting poetry that matched the seasons. The Evergreen Institute sat on 50 acres of manicured grounds, surrounded by old-growth forest. The main building was designed to look like a gracious country estate, all warm stone and large windows with wings that extended on either side. Gardens surrounded it, with walking paths that wound through flower beds and underneath arbors heavy with late-season roses. It didn't look like a medical facility. It looked like somewhere you might go for a peaceful weekend retreat. "It's beautiful," Maya breathed as they pulled up the circular drive. "Wait until you see the inside," Hartwell said. They were met at the entrance by a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an air of calm competence. "M.R. Hartwell, welcome. I'm Dr. Patricia Simmons, the director." She shook his hand and then turned to Maya. "And you must be Catherine's daughter. Your mother is very lucky to have you." Maya felt a lump form in her throat at the simple kindness in the woman's voice. "Thank you for seeing us on such short notice, of course." Mr. Hartwell explained the urgency. "Please come in. Let me show you around." The interior of Evergreen was even more impressive than the exterior. The lobby didn't look institutional at all. It looked like an elegant hotel with comfortable seating areas, a stone fireplace, and artwork that was actually beautiful rather than generic. Dr. Simmons led them down a wide hallway with gleaming hardwood floors. "We have 40 residents currently," she explained as they walked, each in a private suite with their own bathroom. "Family members are encouraged to bring personal items, photos, furniture if it fits. We want each space to feel like home. We've found that familiar surroundings can be very comforting for dementia patients, help ground them when they're feeling confused or agitated." She showed them a suite that was currently vacant. It was spacious and bright, with large windows overlooking the gardens. There was a sitting area with a comfortable armchair and ottoman, a hospital bed that looked like regular furniture, and enough space for a dresser, bookshelf, and personal touches. The bathroom had grabbed bars and safety features, but they were integrated so seamlessly they didn't look clinical. "We have a staff member on duty 24 hours on each hall, Doctor," Simmons continued. "During the day, the ratio is even higher. We offer music therapy 3 times a week, art therapy, gentle exercise classes, and of course, memory activities tailored to each resident's cognitive level. We have a chef who prepares meals fresh daily, and we can accommodate any dietary restrictions or preference." Maya walked to the window and looked out at the garden. She could picture her mother here, sitting in the armchair with a book. Couldn't read it anymore. She could imagine Catherine walking the garden paths, touching the roses, maybe remembering the garden she'd kept at their house in Connecticut. It was everything the current facility wasn't. Warm, personal, dignified. "What about medical care?" Maya asked, turning back. "My mother's going to need more intensive support as the disease progresses. We have a full-time physician on staff and 2 nurse practitioners," Dr. Simmons said. "We're equipped to handle all stages of Alzheimer's care, including end-of-life support. We partner with hospice services when the time comes. Our philosophy is that Comfort and dignity are paramount. We don't do heroic measures or aggressive interventions. We focus on quality of life for whatever time remains. Can I see other areas, the common spaces? Absolutely, Doctor. Simmons led them through the facility. They saw the dining room, which looked like a restaurant rather than a cafeteria, with small tables and real tablecloth. The music room had a piano and comfortable seating, and when they passed, a small group of residents was singing old standards with the music. Maya heard a woman's quavering voice singing the words to Somewhere Over the Rainbow and had to blink back tears. The memory garden was perhaps the most impressive feature. It was designed with different sections, each meant to evoke memories from different eras. There was a 50s-style diner facade, a vintage car, old-fashioned street lamps, a victory garden with vegetables and flowers. The idea was that residents could walk through and be transported to times they remembered more clearly than the present. How much does this cost? Maya asked bluntly when they were back in Dr. Simmons' office. She needed to know the numbers. Needed to understand exactly what accepting Hartwell's help would mean. Dr. Simmons named a figure that made Maya's stomach drop. It was more per month than she made in a year, more than her mother's current facility charged in 6 months. It was an impossible amount, a number that existed in a different reality from the one Maya lived in. However, Dr. Simmons continued, glancing at Hartwell, we do occasionally accept residents on a scholarship basis. If Emmer Hartwell is willing to sponsor your mother's care, we would be honored to have her here. Maya looked at Hartwell, who was watching her carefully. It's your decision, he said quietly, but I hope you'll say yes. Maya thought about her mother, alone in a room that smelled like disinfectant, eating food that came from industrial-sized cans, spending her days staring at a television she didn't understand. And then she thought about her mother here, in a room filled with her own books, looking out at gardens, hearing music, being treated like a person instead of a problem. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Yes, Maya said, her voice breaking. Yes, I want her here. The transfer happened with a speed that left Maya reeling. Dr. Simmons assured them that they could have. Catherine moved within 48 hours if they could get the necessary medical records and personal belongings together. Hartwell made phone calls from the car on the drive back to the city, his voice crisp and authoritative as he arranged for medical transport, for movers to pack up Catherine's room at the old facility, for everything to happen seamlessly. Maya sat beside him, watching him work, and felt the strange disconnect of seeing her life reorganized by someone who had been a complete stranger less than 24 hours ago. I need to be the one to tell her, Maya said when Hartwell ended his latest call, about the move. She won't understand, but I need to be there. Of course, Hartwell said. I'll drive you to the facility now if you'd like. They arrived at Riverside Care just after noon. The contrast between it and Evergreen was stark and depressing. The building was institutional gray, the parking lot cracked and weedy, the entrance marked by a faded sign that had lost 2 letters. Inside, the smell hit Maya like it always did, industrial cleaner failing to mask the underlying odors of age and illness. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. She'd become numb to it over the months, but seeing it now through Hartwell's eyes, she felt a deep shame that her mother had been living here. Catherine was in the common room, sitting in a wheelchair by a window that overlooked the parking lot. A television blared a game show that no one was watching. 2 other residents dozed in chairs nearby. Catherine's hair, once thick and lustrous, hung thin and wispy around her face. She was staring at nothing in particular, her hands folded in her lap, looking small and lost. Mom, Maya said softly, kneeling beside the wheelchair. It's me. It's Maya. Catherine's eyes focused slowly. For a moment there was no recognition at all. Then something shifted, and a vague smile touched her lips. Oh, hello dear. Are you one of the volunteers? The words stabbed at Maya's heart as they did every time her mother didn't know her. I'm your daughter, Mom. I came to visit you, daughter. Catherine looked confused. I don't think I have a daughter. I'm not married yet. I'm still finishing my dissertation. Maya had learned not to contradict her mother's reality, had been taught by the staff that it only caused agitation. That's right, she said gently. Your dissertation on the Romantic poets, how's it going? Oh, it's difficult, Catherine said, her voice taking on a professorial tone. Wordsworth and Coleridge had such a complex relationship. All that creative tension. I'm trying to argue that Kubla Khan is actually a response to Tintern Abbey, but my advisor doesn't agree. Maya glanced back at Hartwell, who stood a few feet away, his face a mask of controlled grief. She saw his hands clenched at his sides, saw the muscle working in his jaw. This was the woman he'd loved, reduced to fragments of a life she'd lived decades ago. Mom, I have some good news, Maya said, taking Catherine's hand. You're going to move to a new place. It's beautiful, with gardens and music. I think you'll like it there. Move? Catherine's face clouded with anxiety. I can't move. I have classes to teach. My students are depending on me. Your students will be fine, Maya assured her. This is just for a little while. You'll be more comfortable there. Will you come with me? Catherine asked, and for a moment her eyes were lucid, focused, almost like her old self. I don't want to be alone. I'll visit you every day, Maya promised. Every single day. I promise. Catherine seemed to accept this, her attention already drifting back to the window. Maya stayed with her for another hour, talking about poetry and literature, letting her mother live in whatever era her mind had retreated to. When a nurse came to take Catherine to lunch, Maya finally stood, her knees aching from kneeling on the hard floor. Hartwell had moved to stand by the door, giving them privacy. When Maya approached, she saw that his eyes were red-rimmed. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry you've had to do this alone, that she's had to be here. We do what we can with what we have," Maya said. But there was no accusation in her voice, just weariness. "She won't remember the move. Tomorrow she probably won't remember this conversation. That's the one mercy of this disease. She doesn't know what she's lost, but you do," Hartwell said. "You remember her as she was. You carry that loss for both of you." The insight surprised Maya. It was exactly right, exactly what she'd never been able to articulate. The grief wasn't just for her mother's condition, but for being the only keeper of their shared history, the only one who remembered who Catherine had been. "Yes," she said simply. They left the facility and sat in Hartwell's car for a long moment, neither speaking. Finally, Maya broke the silence. "You loved her very much. More than I knew how to express," Hartwell said. "I was young and stupid and thought I had time to figure out how to balance everything. I thought we'd find a way through all the obstacles. I never imagined she'd just vanish." He looked at Maya. "She was the bravest person I've ever known, walking away from me, raising you alone, making that choice to protect us both from a life she thought would be toxic. That took more courage than I've ever had." "She was brave," Maya agreed, "but she was also wrong. You should have been given a choice. I should have grown up knowing my father. We lost 30 years because she was trying to be noble. Would you have wanted to know me?" Hartwell asked. "Honestly, I was ruthless in business. I made enemies. There were threats against me, lawsuits, corporate espionage. My brother Richard tried to stage a hostile takeover when I was 32. My mother sided with him. It got ugly. If Catherine had stayed, if you'd been in my life, you both would have been targets." Maya hadn't considered this angle. She'd been so focused on the romance of it, the tragic love story, that she hadn't thought about the practical dangers of being connected to someone that wealthy and powerful. "Is that still true? Are we in danger now?" Hartwell hesitated and Maya's stomach dropped. "I don't think so," he said carefully, "but I need to be honest with you. Once people know you're my daughter, and they will know eventually, your life will change. There will be security concerns, media attention, people who want to use you to get to me or to my fortune. It won't be easy." "I don't care about easy," Maya said, "but I need to know what I'm walking into." Over the next 2 days, Maya learned what it meant to be connected to Alexander Hartwell. The move to Evergreen happened with military precision. A team arrived at Riverside Care to pack Catherine's belongings. Maya brought boxes from her own apartment filled with photo albums, books, Catherine's favorite cardigan, a quilt her grandmother had made. She watched as strangers efficiently transformed an empty suite at Evergreen into something that looked like home, arranging furniture and hanging pictures under her direction. Catherine was transported in a private medical vehicle with a nurse attendant. Maya rode with her, holding her mother's hand while Catherine dozed, confused by the movement but not distressed. When they arrived at Evergreen, Dr. Simmons and her staff were waiting, greeting Catherine like an honored guest rather than a patient. They settled her into her new room with gentle efficiency, and Maya watched her mother's eyes widen as she took in the space. "This is lovely," Catherine murmured. "Are we at a hotel?" "Something like that," Maya said. "You'll be staying here for a while. Will there be tea?" Catherine asked. "I do love afternoon tea." Every day at 3 o'clock, one of the nurses assured her with a warm smile, with real china and fresh scones. Catherine smiled, pleased, and allowed herself to be settled in the armchair by the window. Within an hour, she seemed more relaxed than Maya had seen her in months. The staff brought lunch on a real plate rather than a plastic tray, roasted chicken with herbs, fresh vegetables, a small salad, and chocolate mousse for dessert. Catherine ate more than Maya had seen her eat in weeks. Hartwell had stayed in the background during the move, watching but not interfering. As the sun began to set and Catherine drowsed in her chair, he approached Maya, who stood at the window looking out at the gardens. "Thank you for letting me do this," he said quietly. "I know it wasn't easy to accept help. It wasn't about my pride," Maya said. "It was about her dignity, and this place gives her that." She turned to look at him. "But you're right. My life is about to change, isn't it? Once we do the DNA test, once it's official." "Yes," Hartwell said honestly. "I won't lie to you about that. You don't have to face it alone. I have security teams, lawyers, people who can help navigate all of it, can decide how public you want to be. We can keep it quiet if you prefer, at least for a while." "And what do you want?" Maya asked. "Do you want to acknowledge me publicly? Introduce me as your daughter? Or am I an inconvenient secret that's better kept buried?" The question hung between them, sharp and necessary. Hartwell turned to face Maya fully, and she saw something shift in his expression. The careful businessman fell away, leaving behind a man who looked suddenly vulnerable. "I want the world to know you're my daughter," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I want to introduce you to my colleagues, my friends, what's left of my family. I want to acknowledge you openly and proudly. You're not an inconvenience or a secret. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Even if I only found out about you 2 days ago." The words should have felt good, should have filled the empty place inside Maya that had always wondered about her father. Instead, they made her acutely aware of everything she didn't know, all the complications that came with a statement like that. "What family?" she asked. "You said before that your mother sided with your brother. Are they still in the picture?" Hartwell's expression hardened. "Richard, my younger brother, is the CFO of Hartwell Industries. We have a functional working relationship, which is the best I can say about it. He wanted control of the company, and when he couldn't get it through legitimate means, he tried a hostile takeover. It failed, obviously, but it damaged our relationship permanently. My mother, Eleanor, lives in the family estate in the Hamptons. We speak perhaps 4 times a year, usually through lawyers. She never forgave me for refusing to marry Vanessa Thornton, the woman whose family could have saved your company, Maya said, remembering. Yes. Mother blamed me for years of financial uncertainty, even though I eventually stabilized everything on my own. She's 82 now, bitter and obsessed with maintaining the family's social standing. When she finds out about you, and she will find out, it won't be pleasant. Because I'm illegitimate, Maya said flatly. Because you're proof that I loved someone outside our social circle more than I loved the family name, Hartwell correct. Because you represent everything she tried to prevent. And because acknowledging you might raise questions about secession, about inheritance, Rita has always assumed that when I die, everything will go to him since I have no children. Your existence changes that calculation. Maya felt suddenly cold. I don't want your money. I didn't come looking for you. This whole thing happened by accident, I know that, Hartwell said, and I believe you. But Richard won't. Neither will my mother. They'll assume you're after the fortune, that you somehow engineered this encounter. It's how their minds work. Everything is transactional, strategic. They can't conceive of anything happening organically. Then maybe we shouldn't tell them, Maya said. Maybe we just keep this between us for now. Let me get to know you without all the complications. Hartwell shook his head. I won't hide you. I've spent 30 years living half a life, pretending to be satisfied with business achievements and financial success. I finally have a chance at something real. Something that matters. I'm not going to waste it by keeping you secret. He reached out and took her hand, a gesture that still felt strange and new, but I will protect you. I promise you that, whatever comes, you won't face it alone. The DNA test results came back 3 days later, though both of them had already known what they would say. The lab report confirmed with 99.9% certainty that Alexander James Hartwell was Maya's biological father. Maya stared at the clinical language that transformed her entire identity, and felt oddly numb. She'd thought the confirmation would change something, would make it feel more real. Instead, it just felt like a formality, a piece of paper acknowledging what her heart had already accepted. Hartwell called her the moment he received the results. We need to talk about next steps, he said. I'd like to bring in my legal team to draw up some documents. Make sure you're protected financially regardless of what happens. And I think it's time to tell Richard and my mother. The longer we wait, the worse their reaction will be. When? Maya asked. This weekend. There's a board meeting on Friday and Richard will be there. I'll tell him after. Mother typically comes to the city once a month for her various committees and charity boards. She'll be here Saturday. I can arrange for us to meet with her then. Maya's stomach twisted with anxiety. What if they're horrible to me? Then I'll deal with it, Hartwell said firmly. But you have every right to exist, Maya. You have every right to your place in this family. Don't let anyone, including me in my worst moments, make you feel otherwise. Friday arrived faster than Maya wanted. She'd taken Hartwell up on his offer to reduce her hours at the restaurant, not quitting entirely but cutting back to part-time. The manager, Marcus, had been surprisingly understanding when Hartwell's assistant had called to explain the situation in vague terms about a family matter requiring Maya's attention. She suspected money had changed hands, though she tried not to think too hard about it. She spent Friday morning with her mother at Evergreen. Catherine was having a good day, lucid enough to recognize Maya even if she thought Maya was still a teenager. They sat in the garden together, Catherine admiring the late roses and reciting lines from Keats' Season of Mists and Mellow Fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun. Her voice was thin but clear, the words still there even when everything else had faded. You always loved autumn, Maya said softly. Did I? Catherine looked surprised, as if learning something new about herself. Why? You said it was the most honest season. Everything dying beautifully. Admitting what it was instead of pretending. Catherine considered this, nodding slowly. That sounds like something I would say. I've always appreciated honesty. Then her expression shifted, became troubled. There's something I need to tell you, but I can't remember what it is. Something important. About someone. Maya's heart began to race. About who, Mom? Can you remember? Alex, Catherine said. And the name emerged with perfect clarity. I need to tell you about Alex. He was ... single quotes. She trailed off, frustration crossing her face. I can't hold it. It slips away like water. It's okay, Maya said, squeezing her mother's hand. It's okay. I know about Alex. He's here. He's helping us. Is he? Catherine's eyes filled with tears. That's good. He was always so kind. I shouldn't have left him. I thought I was being noble, but I was just scared. So scared. A single tear tracked down her weathered cheek. Tell him I'm sorry. Can you do that? Tell him I'm sorry. I will. Maya promised, her own voice breaking. I'll tell him that. Single quotes. The moment passed quickly. Catherine's attention drifted to a butterfly landing on a nearby flower, and she was gone again, retreating into whatever safe corner of her mind she could still access. But for that brief window, she'd been herself. She'd remembered, and she'd wanted Alexander to know she was sorry. That evening, Maya met Hartwell at his office after his board meeting. The building was mostly empty, just security guards and a few workaholics still at their desks. Hartwell's suite took up the entire top floor, a sprawling space of glass and steel and abstract art that probably cost more than Maya's entire apartment built. He was standing at the window when she arrived, his suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened, looking out at the city with an expression of deep weariness. How did it go? Maya asked. Richard knows, Hartwell said without turning around. I told him after the meeting. He took it about as well as I expected, which is to say poorly. What did he say? Now Hartwell turned and Maya saw the anger simmering beneath his controlled surface. He accused you of being a con artist, said you'd probably faked the DNA test, that you were working an angle. When I showed him the lab results from our private physician, he pivoted to questioning whether Catherine had been faithful, whether I could really be sure you were mine. His voice went cold. I told him if he ever spoke about Catherine or you that way again, I'd remove him from the company entirely, family or not. You'd do that? Maya asked, surprised. Over someone you barely know? You're not someone I barely know. You're my daughter, and I've spent 30 years letting Richard and my mother poison my life with their cynicism and manipulation. I won't let them do it to you too. Maya walked to where he stood and looked out at the same view he'd been staring at. The city glittered below them, millions of lights representing millions of lives, each one carrying their own complications and secrets. My mother remembered you today, she said quietly. Just for a moment, she said she was sorry for leaving him. She said she thought she was being noble, but she was really just scared. Hartwell's breath caught. She said that. She wanted me to tell you. I don't know if she'll remember it tomorrow or if it'll ever happen again, but today she knew. She remembered loving you. For a long moment, Hartwell said nothing, and he turned away from the window, and Maya saw that tears were streaming down his face. He made no move to hide them, just let them fall. I would have married her, he said, his voice breaking. The day she told me, the hour she told me, I would have walked away from everything. She never gave me the chance. She was protecting you, Maya said. She was wrong, but she was trying to protect you. And it cost us everything, Hartwell said. 30 years. Your entire childhood. All those moments I should have been there for. First days of school, birthdays, scraped knees, teenage heartbreaks. Gone. I can't get them back. No, Maya agreed. You can't. But we have now, and whatever time my mother has left, that has to be enough. Saturday came too quickly. Maya dressed carefully for the meeting with Eleanor Hartwell, choosing a simple navy dress and cardigan that felt appropriate without being pretentious. She studied herself in the mirror and saw her mother's features staring back, the same dark eyes, the same determined set to her jaw. Catherine had faced down graduate committees and tenure boards and academic politics with quiet dignity. Maya could face one disapproving old woman, except Eleanor Hartwell wasn't just any old woman. She was old money, old power, and according to everything Hartwell had told Maya, a woman who viewed other people as either assets or obstacles. Maya was very clearly an obstacle. They met at Eleanor's townhouse in the historic district, a 4-story brownstone that had been in the Hartwell family for 3 generations. Hartwell picked Maya up at her apartment, and she noticed he was more tense than she'd ever seen him. His jaw was tight, his shoulders rigid, and he kept checking his watch as if dreading the appointment. It's not too late to cancel, he said as they pulled up outside the imposing facade. We could do this another time or not at all. You don't owe her anything, but you do, Maya said. She's your mother, and I want to meet her. I want to know where I come from, all of it, even the ugly parts. The front door was answered by a housekeeper who led them through a marble foyer and up a curving staircase to a formal sitting room on the 2nd floor. The space was elegant and cold, all antiques and Persian rugs and portraits of stern-faced ancestors. A fire crackled in a marble fireplace, the only warm thing in the room. Eleanor Hartwell sat in a wingback chair positioned to command the room like a throne. She was 82 but looked 10 years younger, her white hair styled in an elegant chignon, her posture ramrod straight. She wore a silk dress in deep burgundy with a string of pearls that probably cost more than Maya had earned in her entire life. Her eyes, the same gray-blue as her son's, were sharp and calculating as they swept over Maya from head to toe. So, Eleanor said, her voice crisp and patrician, this is the girl, not my granddaughter, not Maya, the girl. The dismissal was immediate and absolute. Mother, Hartwell said, his voice carrying a warning. This is Maya Reeves, your granddaughter. I expect you to treat her with respect. Respect must be earned, Alexander, Eleanor said coolly. It isn't bestowed simply because of biology. She gestured to a sofa opposite her chair. Sit. Both of you. I assume you have documentation proving these extraordinary claims. Hartwell handed her a folder containing the DNA test results, copies of Maya's birth certificate, and photographs of Catherine from 30 years ago. Eleanor examined each document with the careful attention of a lawyer reviewing a contract. Maya sat rigidly on the sofa, acutely aware of being evaluated like a piece of merchandise. The girl looks like her mother, Eleanor said finally, snapping the folder shut. I'll grant you that. And the DNA test appears legitimate, though such things can be fabricated by people with sufficient motivation and resources. It's not fabricated, Hartwell said, his voice hard. Maya is my daughter, your granddaughter. That's not up for debate. Everything is up for debate, Alexander, Eleanor countered, especially when it concerns the family fortune and reputation. She turned her attention fully to Maya, and the weight of that gaze was like being pinned by a spotlight. Tell me, Miss Reeves, what is it you want from my son? Maya had prepared for this question, but the blunt delivery still took her by surprise. I don't want anything, she said, keeping her voice steady. I didn't even know he existed until a week ago. This isn't some elaborate scheme. It's just an accident, a coincidence that led to the truth coming out. There's no such thing as coincidence, Eleanor said dismissively. There are only opportunities that clever people create and exploit. You work as a waitress, I'm told. Your mother is dying in a very expensive care facility that I'm quite certain you couldn't afford on your own. My son has already stepped in to pay for everything, hasn't he? How very convenient for you. The words were designed to wound, to make Maya feel small and mercenary. She felt anger flare in her chest, but forced it down. My mother has early onset Alzheimer's, she said quietly. She's 53 years old, and most days she doesn't know who I am. Yes, your son is paying for her care at Evergreen because he loved her 30 years ago, and because she deserves dignity in her final months. I would have managed on my own if I've been managing on my own my entire life. How admirable, Eleanor said, her tone making it clear she found nothing admirable about it at all. A tragic story, certain, but that doesn't make you a Hartwell. That doesn't give you any claim to this family. I don't want a claim to this family, Maya shot back, her patience finally fracturing. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask for any of this, but I exist, whether you like it or not. And your son wants a relationship with me. That's between him and me. You don't get a vote. Eleanor's eyes narrowed dangerously. You're very bold for someone in your position. Perhaps you've forgotten that you're sitting in my house, that your very comfortable situation exists entirely at my son's discretion. He could withdraw his support at any time. He won't, Maya said with certainty. Are you so sure? Alexander has always been sentimental, prone to grand gestures, but sentimentality fades. When he realizes what a liability you are, how you complicate everything, he'll tire of this novelty. You'll be left with nothing. Mother, that's enough. Single quotes. Hartwell stood, his face flushed with anger. Maya is not a liability or a novelty. She's my daughter, and if you can't accept that, if you can't treat her with basic human decency, then we're done here. Sit down, Alexander, Eleanor commanded, and her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. I'm not finished. Yes, you are, Hartwell said. I came here as a courtesy to inform you that I have a daughter and that she will be part of my life going forward. I hoped you might surprise me, that you might show an ounce of warmth or compassion, but I should have known better. You've never approved of any choice I've made, any path I've taken that didn't align with your vision of what a Hartwell should be. Your choices nearly destroyed this family, Eleanor snapped, her composure finally cracking. Your refusal to marry Vanessa Thornton cost us years of financial instability. Your stubborn insistence on running the company your way drove your brother to attempt to take over. And now this girl appearing out of nowhere with her dying mother and her convenient story, and you welcome her with open arms without considering the consequences? The consequences? Hartwell's voice was ice. What consequences, Mother? That I might actually be happy? That I might have something in my life besides quarterly reports and board meeting? God forbid the great Alexander Hartwell might want a family. You could have had a family, Eleanor said viciously. You could have married Vanessa, had legitimate children, built something proper. Instead, you pined after some nobody professor who walked away from you and then reappear. Decades later through a daughter you never knew existed. It's pathetic. Maya had heard enough. She stood, her whole body trembling with rage. My mother was not a nobody. She was brilliant and kind, and she loved your son more than he deserved. She walked away to protect him from exactly this kind of toxic manipulation. She knew that being in your family would poison everything good between them, and she was right. The words rang out in the elegant room, shocking in their directness. Eleanor stared at Maya as if she'd been slapped. Hartwell stood frozen, caught between his mother and his daughter. How dare you, Eleanor whispered. How dare I? Maya laughed, a bitter sound. How dare you? You sit here in your mansion with your pearls and your portraits and your ancient money, and you judge everyone around you. Your son has built an empire. He's brilliant and generous, and he's spent 30 years alone because you convinced him that love was less important than legacy. Well, congratulations. You got your legacy. I hope it keeps you warm at night. Maya turned and walked out of the room before anyone could respond. She heard Hartwell calling after her, but she didn't stop. She ran down the stairs, past the startled housekeeper, and out onto the street. The afternoon air was cold, autumn turning toward winter, and she pulled her cardigan tight around herself as she walked quickly away from the brownstone. She made it 2 blocks before Hartwell caught up with her, slightly out of breath. Maya, wait, please. She stopped, but didn't turn around. I can't do this. I can't be part of that world. Your mother's right about one thing. I don't belong there. My mother's wrong about everything, Hartwell said firmly. He moved to face her, and she saw that his eyes were bright with emotion. What you said in there about her poisoning everything, about love and legacy, you were right. She's been poisoning my life for as long as I can remember. I let her because I thought I owed her something, thought I had to maintain the family unity at all costs. But I'm done. I'm choosing you, Maya. I'm choosing my daughter over my mother's approval. You shouldn't have to choose, Maya said, tears finally spilling over. That's not fair to you. Life isn't fair, Hartwell said. Your mother learned that 30 years ago. You've learned it taking care of her. I'm learning it now. But we get to decide what we do with the unfairness. We can let it make us bitter like Eleanor, or we can choose connection over control. Love over legacy. He reached out tentatively and took her hand. Please don't walk away. Don't let her drive you away like Catherine was driven away. I can't lose you both. Maya looked at their joined hands, at the physical connection between them. She thought about her mother sitting in the garden at Evergreen, reciting poetry to the roses. She thought about the photograph Hartwell had carried for 30 years, worn soft with handling. She thought about all the years they'd lost and all the years that might remain if they were brave enough to claim them. Okay, she said finally. Okay, I'll stay, but I'm not going back in that house. Neither am I, Hartwell said. Done there. We'll build our own family, on our own terms. No more toxic obligations, no more sacrificing happiness for appearances. He pulled her into an embrace, and Maya let herself lean into it, let herself be held by her father for the first time in her life. They stood on the sidewalk outside Eleanor Hartwell's brownstone, two people who had found each other against impossible odds, and chose to hold on despite everything trying to pull them apart. The weeks that followed the confrontation with Eleanor were a period of adjustment and unexpected grace. Maya had expected fallout, some kind of retaliation from the Hartwell matriarch, but what came instead was silence. Eleanor retreated to her estate in the Hamptons and made no further contact. Richard, too, kept his distance, though Hartwell reported that board meetings had become icier and more contentious. The family was fracturing, but for the first time in his life, Hartwell seemed at peace with that reality. Maya found herself settling rhythm. She continued working part-time at the Golden Terrace, though more because she wanted to maintain some independence than because she needed the money. Hartwell had insisted on setting up a trust fund for her, structured so that she would receive a monthly stipend that covered her expenses with enough left over for saving. It was generous without being overwhelming, giving her breathing room without making her feel bought. Most of her time was spent at Evergreen with Catherine. The change in her mother's quality of life was profound. Catherine still didn't know who Maya was most days, still lived in fragments of her past, but she seemed calmer, more content. The music therapy sessions brought tears to Maya's eyes. Her mother would sit at the piano with the therapist, her fingers remembering melodies that her mind had forgotten, playing Chopin and Debussy with a ghost of her former skill. Hartwell came to visit Catherine 3 times during those first weeks. The encounters were bittersweet. The first time, Catherine had looked at him with polite confusion, treating him like a stranger. The second time, she'd become agitated, insisting he was late for a date they'd planned and demanding to know why he'd kept her waiting. Hartwell had handled it with remarkable composure, apologizing for being late and promising to do better next time. The third visit had been the hardest. Catherine had looked at him with sudden clarity and said simply, "You came back." Then she'd started crying, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the very core of her being. And Hartwell had held her while she wept, his own tears falling into her hair. "She knows," Maya had said quietly as they left that day. "Somewhere deep down, she knows who you are and what you meant to each other." "I hope so," Hartwell had replied. "I hope some part of her knows I never stopped loving her." As October turned to November, Maya and Hartwell began building something that resembled a father-daughter relationship. It was awkward at first, neither of them quite sure how to navigate the terrain of instant family. They started with dinner once a week, neutral ground at restaurants where they could talk without the weight of his penthouse or her apartment coloring the conversation. Hartwell asked questions about her life, her interests, her dreams that had been deferred by financial necessity and her mother's illness. Maya asked about his childhood, his father, the early days of building the company. She learned that Alexander Hartwell wasn't just a ruthless businessman. He was also someone who loved old movies, who collected rare books, who had once wanted to be an architect before family obligation had pulled him into the company. He was funny in a dry, understated way. He was generous to his employees, quietly paying for medical treatments and education for those who couldn't afford it. He was lonely, desperately lonely, and had been for most of his adult life. "I thought success would be enough," he told her one evening over Italian food in a small restaurant far from the business district. "I thought if I built something significant, if I proved myself, I'd feel fulfilled. But it's all hollow. Every achievement, every deal closed, every billion added to the company's value. It doesn't mean anything if there's no one to share it with." "You could still find someone," Maya pointed out. "You're not that old." 56 is young these days. "Maybe," Hartwell said, though he didn't sound convinced. "But I think I had my great love. Some people only get one. Catherine was mine. Everything else would feel like settling." Maya understood that. She'd watched her mother live with the same philosophy, never dating, never even seeming interested in the possibility. Catherine had poured all her love into Maya and her work, and it had been enough because the memory of Alexander Hartwell had sustained her. It was romantic and tragic in equal measure. The media eventually caught wind of Maya's existence. It started with a gossip blog post speculating about Alexander Hartwell's mysterious dinner companion, complete with a grainy photo of them leaving a restaurant. Within days, the story had exploded. Investigative journalists dug into Maya's background, uncovering her mother's identity, the timeline of Catherine and Alexander's relationship, the DNA test results that had somehow been leaked. The headlines were sensational. "Billionaire's secret love child. Hartwell heir discovered after 26 years. From Waitress to Fortune." Maya's phone rang constantly with interview requests. Reporters showed up at her apartment building, at the restaurant, even at Evergreen, until Hartwell's security team intervened. It was overwhelming and invasive, and Maya hated every minute of it. She declined all interviews, refused to comment, tried to maintain some semblance of privacy, but the story had a life of its own, spinning out into speculation about inheritance, about whether Maya would join the company, about what this meant for Richard's position. Through it all, Hartwell remained steady. He issued a brief statement confirming that Maya was his daughter, that they were building a relationship, and that he would appreciate privacy for his family during this time. His lawyers sent cease and desist letters to the most aggressive outlets. Security was increased around Maya's apartment and at Evergreen. Slowly, as the initial frenzy died down and no further drama materialized, the media attention began to fade. It was during this period that Catherine's condition began to deteriorate more rapidly. The doctors at Evergreen had warned that this often happened with Alzheimer's patients. periods of relative stability followed by sharp declines. Catherine stopped being able to feed herself. She stopped speaking incoherent sentences. She began having seizures that required medication and constant monitoring. The light that had briefly returned to her eyes after the move to Evergreen began to dim. Maya spent entire days at her mother's bedside, reading poetry aloud, even though Catherine gave no sign of comprehension. Hartwell came too, often straight from the office, still in his suit, looking incongruous in the gentle, home-like environment of Evergreen. They took turns sitting with Catherine, sometimes together, sometimes giving each other space to grieve privately. One evening in late November, as snow began to fall outside Catherine's window, Dr. Simmons pulled Maya aside. "It won't be long now," she said gently. "Days, maybe a week at most. Her body is shutting down. We're keeping her comfortable, but there's nothing more we can do medically. It's time to say goodbye." Maya had known this was coming, had been preparing for it since the diagnosis 3 years ago, but the reality of it still hit like a physical blow. She called Hartwell from the hallway outside Catherine's room, her voice breaking as she delivered the news. He arrived within the hour, and together they sat vigil at Catherine's bedside. Catherine drifted in and out of consciousness, her breathing shallow and labored. Sometimes her eyes would open and track across the room as if seeing things that weren't there. Sometimes her lips would move, forming words that made no sound. Maya held one of her hands, Hartwell held the other, and they waited. In the early hours of the morning, as the snow continued to fall and the world outside lay silent and white, Catherine opened her eyes with sudden clarity. She looked first at Maya, and recognition flickered across her face. "My beautiful girl," she whispered, her voice so faint Maya had to lean close to hear. "You were always so strong, so brave." "Mom," Maya choked out. "I'm here. I'm right here." Single quotes then, Catherine's gaze moved to Hartwell, and Maya saw love and regret war across her mother's features. "Alex," Catherine breathed. "You found her. I knew you would." "I did," Hartwell said, tears streaming down his face. "And she's perfect, Catherine. She's absolutely perfect. You did an incredible job raising her." "I should have told you," Catherine said, each word an effort. "I was wrong. I robbed us all of so much time." "It doesn't matter," Hartwell said fiercely. "None of it matters. I love you. I've always loved you. That never changed." Catherine smiled. A real smile that transformed her wasted face into an echo of the young woman from the photograph. "I know," she said. "I carried that with me every day. It was enough." Her eyes began to close. "Take care of each other. Promise me." "We promise," Maya and Hartwell said in unison. Catherine's smile deepened. "Good," she murmured. And then so quietly they almost missed it. "Finally I can rest." Her breathing slowed, the spaces between each breath growing longer. Maya and Hartwell held her hands, anchoring her to the world for as long as they could. And then, as the first light of dawn began to brighten the snow-covered gardens outside, Catherine Reeves took one last breath and was gone. The silence that followed was absolute. Maya sat frozen, unable to process that her mother, the constant center of her universe for 26 years, was simply gone. Hartwell bowed his head, his shoulders shaking with silent grief. They stayed like that for a long time, holding Catherine's cooling hands, unable to let go. Finally, Dr. Simmons came in with 2 nurses. They were gentle and respectful as they began the necessary procedures, giving Maya and Hartwell time to say their final goodbyes. Maya kissed her mother's forehead, smoothed back her hair one last time. Hartwell did the same, whispering something against Catherine's temple that Maya couldn't hear. They left the room together and walked to the small chapel that Evergreen maintained for families. It was non-denominational and peaceful, with simple wooden pews and a large window overlooking the gardens. They sat side by side in silence, processing their grief, finding comfort in each other's presence. "She gave me the greatest gift at the end," Hartwell said finally, his voice raw. "She knew me. She knew we'd found each other. That's all I needed. She loved you until the very end," Maya said. That never changed either. Catherine's funeral was held on a clear December morning when the world seemed scrubbed clean by winter. They chose a small cemetery in Connecticut, not far from the house where Maya had grown up, where Catherine had planted roses and read poetry on the porch. It was intimate by design, just 20 people, former colleagues from the college, a few of Catherine's oldest friends, the staff from Evergreen who had cared for her in her final month, and Maya and Hartwell standing together at the front. The service was simple and literary, as Catherine would have wanted. Maya read from Wordsworth, her voice breaking on the lines about memory and loss and the enduring power of love. One of Catherine's former students, now a professor herself, spoke about Catherine's passion for teaching, her ability to make 19th century poetry feel urgent and alive, and Hartwell, surprising everyone including himself, stood and spoke about the woman he'd loved 3 decades ago. "Catherine taught me that there are some things more valuable than success," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "She taught me about integrity, about choosing love over convenience, about the courage it takes to walk away from something comfortable because you believe it's right. I lost 30 years with her because of her choice, and I was angry about that for a long time. But I understand now that everything she did out of love. She protected me, she protected our daughter, and she never asked for anything in return. That's the kind of person she was. That's the legacy she leaves behind." Maya watched him speak and felt something shift and settle in her chest. This was her father. Not the billionaire, not the powerful businessman, but this man who had loved her mother enough to carry a photograph for 30 years, who had shown up when when it mattered, who was choosing connection over pride. After the service, as people gathered in small groups sharing memories and condolences, Richard Hartwell appeared. Maya hadn't known he was coming, and from the look on Alexander's face, neither had he. Richard approached them cautiously, looking uncomfortable in his expensive black suit. "I'm sorry for your loss," Richard said stiffly, addressing Maya. "I never met Catherine, but by all accounts she was a remarkable woman." "Thank you," Maya said, uncertain what game he was playing. Richard turned to his brother. "Alex, can we talk privately?" Hartwell looked at Maya, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, giving him permission. The two brothers walked to a quiet corner of the cemetery, and Maya watched them from a distance. Their conversation was brief but intense. She saw Richard's shoulders slump, saw him extend his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Hartwell shook it. When Hartwell returned, he looked lighter somehow. "What was that about?" Maya asked. "An apology," Hartwell said, sounding surprised. A genuine one. He said he'd been thinking about what I told him about choosing you over the company if I had to. He said it made him realize how much he'd let ambition poison his relationships. He wants to try to rebuild things between us. I'm not sure I trust it completely, but it's a start. Eleanor Hartwell did not attend the funeral. Her absence was noted, but not unexpected. Some wounds were too deep, some divisions too fundamental to be bridged by death. Maya found she didn't care. She'd spent her whole life without that particular grandmother, and she could continue just fine. The weeks after the funeral were strange and hollow. Maya moved through her days in a fog of grief, going through the motions but feeling untethered. She quit her job at the Golden Terrace, finally accepting that she no longer needed it, and that holding on to it was more about fear than independence. She spent hours sorting through her mother's belongings, deciding what to keep and what to let go. Every book, every piece of clothing, every photograph was a small agony. Hartwell was there through all of it, steady and patient. He helped her pack boxes. He sat with her while she cried. He shared stories about Catherine from their time together, giving Maya glimpses of her mother as a young woman in love. Slowly, tentatively, they built something that felt like family. In January, on what would have been Catherine's 54th birthday, they scattered her ashes in the garden at Evergreen. It felt right, returning her to the place where she'd spent her final months in peace and dignity. Afterward, they sat in the memory garden, bundled in coats against the cold, watching the winter sun set through bare branches. "I've been thinking," Hartwell said, "about what comes next. For both of us?" "Oh?" Maya prompted. "The company is stable. Richard is actually stepping up, becoming more of a partner than an adversary. I could step back if I wanted to, spend less time in boardrooms and more time on things that actually matter." He looked at her. "I'd like to start a foundation, the Catherine Reeves Foundation for Arts and Education, fund scholarships for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, support teachers, preserve the kind of literary education that Catherine devoted her life to. I want her to have a legacy beyond just the people she taught." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. She would have loved that. "I'd want you to be involved," Hartwell continued, "if you're interested, not just as a figurehead, but actually running it, shaping it. You understand what it's like to struggle for an education, to have potential but not resources. You could make a real difference." The offer was tempting, meaningful in a way that her restaurant job had never been. But Maya hesitated. "I don't have a degree. I dropped out of community college to take care of Mom. I don't have business experience or nonprofit experience or any of the qualifications you'd normally want." "You have something better," Hartwell said. "You have perspective. You have integrity. You have your mother's passion for education and literature. The rest we can learn. I'll be there to help, but it would be your vision, your foundation, in Catherine's name." Maya thought about it, imagining a future where she could help other young people like herself, could honor her mother's memory in a tangible way. "Can I think about it? Take all the time you need." But Maya found she didn't need much time at all. 3 days later, she called Hartwell and told him yes. They began meeting with lawyers and advisors, setting up the structure for the foundation. Maya threw herself into the work, researching existing scholarship programs, reaching out to educators, developing criteria for grants. It gave her purpose, pulled her out of the grief fog into something constructive. By March, the Catherine Reeves Foundation was officially established with an initial endowment of $10 million. The announcement made headlines again, but this time the coverage was positive. Hartwell honors lost love with Education Foundation. Billionaire's daughter champions literacy and arts. Maya did a few carefully selected interviews, speaking about her mother's legacy and her vision for helping students who faced the same barriers she had. One evening, as Maya and Hartwell celebrated the foundation's launch with dinner at a quiet restaurant, Maya noticed him pull something from his pocket, the photograph, the same worn, faded image of Catherine laughing, the picture that had started everything. "I want you to have this," Hartwell said, sliding it across the table. "It's been my talisman for 30 years. But I think it's time I let it go." "Not let her go," he clarified quickly, "but let go of the grief, the regret, the what-ifs. We have something real now, you and I. We have the foundation and a future. We have each other. That's what Catherine would want." Maya picked up the photograph, running her finger along the crease down the center, the worn edges. This image had been the key that unlocked everything, the bridge between past and present. "Are you sure?" I'm sure, Hartwell said. Besides, I have new pictures now. He pulled out his phone and showed her the gallery. Photos of Maya at the foundation office laughing at something off-screen. Photos of the two of them at Catherine's grave. Photos of them working together, building something meaningful. Maya smiled, feeling something warm and healing spread through her chest. New memories, Hartwell agreed. 6 months after Catherine's death, Maya stood in a university auditorium announcing the first recipients of Catherine Reeves Memorial Scholarships. 20 students, all from challenging backgrounds, all passionate about literature and the arts, all receiving full funding for their education. Maya looked out at their hopeful faces and thought about her mother, about the students Catherine had inspired over her career, about the ripple effect one person's dedication could have. Hartwell sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Beside him was Richard, who had taken a genuine interest in the foundation and was exploring similar initiatives for STEM education. Even some of Catherine's former colleagues had come, creating a bridge between Maya's old life and her new one. As Maya finished her speech and the students came forward to accept their scholarships, she felt her mother's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. Catherine had walked away from love to protect the people she cared about, but in doing so, she'd set in motion a chain of events that had ultimately brought them all together. The sacrifice had been real. The years lost were gone forever, but something beautiful had emerged from the pain. That night, Maya returned to her new apartment, a modest place that she'd chosen herself and furnished with her own taste. The old photograph of Catherine sat on her dresser in a simple frame. Next to it was a new photo, Maya and Alexander at the foundation's opening, standing in front of a portrait of Catherine that hung in the lobby, both of them smiling. She picked up both photographs, holding them together. The past and the present, loss and love, grief and hope, all of it woven together into something that felt, finally, like home. A simple sentence had been the key that turned a lock she'd never known existed. An observation about a ring, a photograph, and a wallet. A coincidence that wasn't a coincidence at all, but fate working in its mysterious way. And from that one moment in a diner, an entire world had shifted, secrets had been revealed, and two people who should never have found each other had built something neither of them could have imagined. This wasn't a fairy tale. There was no perfect ending, no magical resolution that erased all the pain. Eleanor Hartwell remained estranged. The years lost with Catherine could never be recovered. The grief would always be there, a constant companion. But alongside the grief was something new: connection, purpose, family. Maya had found her father, Alexander had found his daughter, and together they were building a legacy that honored the woman who had loved them both enough to let them go. Sometimes, Maya thought, the greatest loves are the ones that teach us what really matters. Catherine had learned it, Alexander had learned it, and now Maya understood it too. Love wasn't about possession or convenience or security. It was about choosing someone again and again, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. She placed the photographs back on the dresser and looked out at the city lights sparkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, other stories were unfolding, other secrets waiting to be discovered, other families finding their way to each other through impossible circumstances. Her story was just one among millions, but it was hers, and it was real, and it was enough.